Hey everybody, welcome to a very special Ice Cave Radio. It's not often that we get a chance to sit down and chat with a Planetary Qualifier champion like we have right on the other side of the screen here, but we have a special opportunity to do so. Matthew Muenzenberger just came out on top of the Planetary Qualifier in Pasadena, California, here in the Los Angeles area yesterday. I was there. I was like 1-3 and drop. I was a little bit under practice, but I had a good time. But you went all the way. Congratulations, and doing it on Han1 Tarkintown. So we'll get into that later. We'll talk about the list because I feel like Han1 Tarkintown is a list that's kind of been on the fringes for a while. I don't know if you remember this, but Xander Tabler, the community manager at Fantasy Flight, won a internal like developer tournament with Han Tarkintown like a few months back in like set 2. Something like that a few months ago.
I do recall when that happened, yeah.
Yeah. Did that have any bearing on you playing it? Was that any inspiration, or was it just sort of parallel events happening there?
You know, potentially subconsciously speaking, I've always been someone who tries to like innovate new decks and test out different strategies and what the so-called meta is. I mean, I played Boba a lot, but even like set 2, I was really trying to innovate Han 2 blue. And I've always had a focus on like discard strategies. And then when set 3 rolled around, I was really high on Han yellow.
Okay.
And then I saw like Quinlan Voss come around as like a new meta deck. And for me, I was like, isn't Han just a better leader? And I can cheat things out, and I can take some of those Han yellow strategies and kind of shift it into red and like Tarkintown and get more of an emphasis on, playing ahead of curve, getting Falcon out turn 1 and tech DJ. And then, like you said, they said, or Xander, he kind of said, Han was kind of intended to be red. That's what they thought. That's what they saw in their internal play testing.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I took it and I rolled with that, and it worked out well for me.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's a great preview of the list that we'll take a look at a little bit later. But before we get into this, I want to talk about you a little bit. So my first question for you is this your first card game, or have you been playing card games for a while? This is the first time that you and I have actually spoken. We didn't speak at the event yesterday. I just DM'd you this morning and asked if you'd be willing to do this, and you're gracious enough to say yes. So I want to learn a little bit about you. Yeah, tell me your history in card games first.
All right. So I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay.
I played Yu-Gi-Oh at a very young age, very casually, not really knowing what I was doing, just playing kind of like school ground card games. And then when I got into high school, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Not necessarily like competitively, but competitively like at school events and whatnot. And then as I got older, I was like, let me start trying to take, Yu-Gi-Oh! Into more of a competitive setting and, going to weeklies at my local game store. And then I attended one regional in Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't do very well, but that game that kind of helped me garner a lot of card game experience. I still play Yu-Gi-Oh! Casually to this day.
Oh, okay.
But it was one of those games where I just kind of lost my passion over time for it.
Yeah,
and it's
happens.
Really expensive, so that's a shame with that card game.
Like that's one of the few card games I've actually never played. Weirdly enough, I feel like I've played every other card game under the sun, but Yu-Gi-Oh is just the one I never actually really got into. The one that my big Yu-Gi-Oh memory is when I lived in Korea for a little while. It was really common for kids to like rip Yu-Gi-Oh packs at the corner stores and then just like throw all the cards they didn't want on the ground. And so around all the corner stores in Korea and Seoul at the time, this is like the mid 2010s, every corner store was just like littered with like bulk Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I don't know what it was, but that was just like the trend to just toss your bulk on the ground outside the store. So I guess that's one way to handle it, We all wonder what to do with our bulk. But then, then Star Wars Unlimited came along, and you started playing right on release, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, so I got the opportunity to test it out at a TwitchCon before the game released.
Oh, okay, cool.
Like October of last year, and they had the Luke and Vader starter decks, and so I got the exclusive playmat from the event, got to try it out, and I was like, this is a really fun card game, and so I was looking forward to when it was released. I went to 3 pre-releases, won 2 of them, and I was like, I'm a little bit more advantaged because I played a little bit before other people did, so.
That's awesome. So what was it about the game that really kind of like drew you to it?
I'm a big fan of the interaction. Coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like one player goes and they do everything they're going to do. You might be sitting around 10 plus minutes waiting for them to finish unless you have some kind of like there's like interaction in Yu-Gi-Oh! From like hand cards. You can like play a card that interrupts it, but if you don't have anything, your opponent's going to wail out, do a huge combo, whatever. And so in this game, it feels much more back and forth. It feels much more free flowing. You take an action, I take an action,
Mhm.
and that's just like something's like special with that. And it creates such a just a better game, I feel like, where you feel more in control instead of, oh, I just didn't win the die roll and I didn't get to go first.
Yeah, I hear that. It feels. I know that the term chess-like is like way overused, but I think
Hmm.
when people say chess-like, what they're really talking about is what you're talking about, where you feel like you really have agency all throughout the game. Where there's
Hmm.
no time where you're just sitting there watching your opponent do things. You always have a chance to respond. I like to tell people that the game like essentially plays at instant speed because you always have a chance to immediately respond to everything your opponent does. And I don't know about you, but I feel like that really emphasizes player skill more than a lot of other TCGs do, because while sequencing is important in a lot of those games, right? You can easily mess up a long combo turn in like Yu-Gi-Oh or something like that,
Hmm.
Flesh and Blood, for example. I feel like this game is more skill expressive because you have such an opportunity to change your line during the action or during the phase, rather.
Hmm.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about the planetary qualifier yesterday. Now, I think going into it, a lot of us were kind of like wondering how many people would show up. We
Right.
were, yeah, I mean, like, unfortunately, I'm sure many of you have, if not all of you, have heard about it now. There's like very, very bad wildfires going on in the LA area. Lots of smoke, although thankfully it wasn't too bad yesterday, but obviously a lot of people lost their homes. There's a lot of bad things happening, basically. So I think nearly everyone in the area knows somebody that, either knows someone that lost something or knows someone personally that lost something in the fires already. And so that combined with all the smoke and Odyssey Games, which is a great venue for the location, but very close to the Eaton fire, actually, we kind of
Hmm.
wondered what was going to happen. So we ended up having a little over 100 people, I think it was, coming into it yesterday. And so we still had a good turnout. Everyone had a good time. Thankfully, it wasn't that smoky, but I feel like that kind of had an effect on it too, where I'm sure it would have been completely packed otherwise, but
Right.
still a good turnout nonetheless. And yeah, like I said, thankfully not too crazy as far as like the smoke went and everything. But I'm curious about your experience on the day. Like you don't need to go through it round by round, matchup by matchup, but
Sure.
just kind of give me the basic flow of how things went for you day of yesterday.
I think as far as the flow of the games, I ran into a couple off meta decks my first couple matchups, which you might assume are going to be easy matchups, but they're not necessarily when you aren't prepped for them,
For
and
sure.
you're kind of figuring out things on the fly. My very first matchup was a Obi-Wan Red, and he
Oh,
was
okay.
playing Sentinels every single turn. And
Hmm.
so that created a kind of disruption, and he had some deck techs. He was running a Grenade Strike, which was
Huh.
actually killing multiple of my units because I'd have to hit into Sentinels with 2 units. And
Yeah.
then he'd be even give them 1 extra HP with Obi-Wan action. And so, it's like being able to figure out those lines on the fly definitely can be difficult sometimes. And so,
Yeah.
I ran into a couple of those decks, but I still experienced enough to, I'm like on the fly, I know what I'm doing. And so I was able to take those matches down. And then as I got more towards the top tables, I ran into more of those meta decks and more into what I
Mhm.
was prepared for.
It is always the early rounds of tournaments like that feel the hardest. A lot of cases, like my first round was a
Hmm.
Dr. Afra, and I was like, I
Oh
don't
my
think
goodness.
I've never played against a good Dr. Afra. They were Afra Command, and they were really good actually. It was close, but they
Oh
got
wow.
me, and I was like, man, I just had to, because you end up having to think about things in a way you haven't thought about in the game yet.
Right.
So I'm curious how much of that, what in your opinion, then how much of that ends up being just really sticking to fundamentals, like the core of what works in Star Wars Unlimited, versus having to like pivot in the moment and be like, I think this is the right answer, so I'm going to try it. I hope it works out. What's kind of the balance in your opinion on that for those off meta matchups?
You know, um, in those off meta matchups, I think I have a pretty significant advantage being a hand control deck with Spark of Rebellion.
Yeah, fair.
The moment I see like my opponent's hand, I'm jotting down what they run and getting an idea of how they built their deck.
Hmm.
And I figured out against the Obi-Wan player specifically that he had all these Sentinels, and I go, oh, he's prepared for those aggro decks. And so I was like, let me flip my strategy from just trying to go for base, and if I hand hate him and he can't keep a bunch of Sentinels in his hand, he has to make these difficult choices. That'll be how I win that game. And so I think it is, a balance. And obviously, for different decks, you have different ways of getting there. But for me, once I see what they're doing, I can kind of figure out like what way I have to go.
Okay, that makes sense. So what would you say was that? I've got like an eyelash in my eye. I don't know why this is happening now, but what would you say is what was like the toughest matchup of the day? Was it the finals? Because talk about off meta a little bit. The finals we should mention was against a Yoda command, I believe it was, right?
Yeah, it was.
And
Yeah.
like I heard a little bit about this Yoda player that he was just like a very dedicated Thrawn player apparently, and then swapped to
Oh
Yoda
wow.
when set 3 came out. So he really liked to play things that let him peek at the top card of a deck, right? And really kind of like try to take advantage of that. But I haven't gotten a chance to watch the finals yet. I'm gonna be able to get access to the VODs a little bit later here. But tell me about that finals first of all against the Yoda. Talk about off meta. Like that was
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
right?
Incredible, fantastic player. I think inherently it was a bad matchup for him.
Hmm.
My hand hate into something like a control deck is kind of where Han thrives as a leader. And so I was able to just push so much damage so fast
Okay.
before he could like, get any kind of equalization out to the point where both games I won 2-0. Both
Hmm.
games when Yoda flipped, he was forced to um peek the top card of his deck and not have it planned.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so one time it was a 3 and it killed R2D2 game 1. Game 2 it was a 2 and killed nothing that was on the board.
Man.
And then he was forced to go Yoda leader into one of my units to try and save some damage. And both times I had Han unit in hand to just take out
Oh,
the
okay.
Yoda.
Yeah, it's funny to hear with about Han and hand hate, right? Because when you look at some of the old, the more traditional Han decks, like especially Han Command and stuff, that's a deck that's very vulnerable to hate. So it's hand
Hmm.
hate. So it's interesting to see hand hate coming out of a Han deck too, right?
Right.
I think that probably helped a ton when you ran into, like, I saw a good amount of Han Cunning out there. I don't know if I saw any Han commands, but I would imagine there's maybe one or two. Did you run into any other Han 1 leaders?
I did not play another Han one that
Oh,
entire
okay.
tournament, no.
Did you? So what? Just without, you don't have to go through like game by game, but do you remember the matchups? Each one, just like listing which ones what
Yeah,
you
yeah.
ended up playing
So I
against.
faced Obi-Wan, then I
All right.
faced Tarkin.
Okay.
Tarkin Yellow, a little shout out sneaky buff my lurking tie decks.
Yep.
I had to play that kind of the same way against the Obi-Wan. Clear your board so you're not buffing everything, and then I'm like just
Mm-hmm.
destroyed. Um, Funny enough, he had like a 7-10 ISB agent, and I just
What?
bamboozled it because I main board bamboozle for aggro, which happened to
Oh
be really,
no.
really good against him. Yeah,
That's
he did
awesome.
not that did not feel good for him.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah.
Third, what did I play third? I played my buddy who also topped 8 named Larson. He was on Boss Green ECL.
Okay.
Um, I played him at some point, took him down. I played a Sabine, the same Sabine I played again in top 4. I took him down. It's very, very close. 24 on my base.
Always is on the
Um,
Sabines. Yeah, I feel
yeah,
like. Yeah.
with that kind of matchup, it's just like, feels like a coin toss either way.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, I'm like, what? Oh, I faced a Kira Green.
Oh,
That
okay.
was actually my cam game. So the camera died, so I don't know if you'll be able to watch any
Okay.
footage of the finals because they only recorded up to round 5 at the top table,
Oh,
which was my
really?
game against the Kira Green.
Oh, okay.
And then I faced a Cad Bane, and then Cad Bane, game 1 I just didn't have much. Game 2 was extremely close. I sniped his hand, got him to 23, and he top deck a Ruthless Raider, and that got him there.
Okay. Yeah, that's and
He
that
ended up
was.
getting fourth. He lost to the Yoda Green in top 4
Oh,
on the other
okay.
side of the bracket.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing the Cad Banes come up, and I think obviously a lot of this comes from the Boba Fett restriction, where that kind
Hmm.
of has unlocked the ability for Cad Banes to kind of excel. Do you feel? And here's another question for you, just kind of on the meta side of things. We've seen like a lot less Django's, I feel like lately across different
Mm.
tournaments across different regions, or at least if not less Django's in the tournament, less Django's making the top cut. Do you feel
Hmm.
like that might be kind of the rise of Cad Bane a little bit too? Or do you feel like it's just people have played against Django now that they're kind of figuring out and people are moving off of it onto other things like Quinlan, for instance, came up a lot in the last month or so. What's your take on that?
I was high on Django as a surprise deck in the beginning of the set, and then as more people came to play it, and I saw the way that Boss Blue was able to kind of like change his deck around, and even like those hard control decks like the Iden Blue,
Mm-hmm.
I think like a boss blue is very, very good into Django. Like insanely good. They're gonna win majority of the games. The Django is just banking on lurking tide, not getting taken out by a perilous position. And so I'm not very high on Django right now, being able to compete in this current meta with the couple control decks that there are. That being
Okay.
said, we're kind of still in an aggro meta, with Cad Bane, but I think Cad Bane is much more better into one of those harder control decks than Django Fett is.
Oh, totally. He's much more on
Mhm.
the, well, at least the lists that I've been seeing are much more on the mid-rangey kind of side, where,
Right.
yeah, you try to kind of be ready to handle aggro with the pings and things, but then you can go longer. You have some big threats for late if you are able to put on some of that pressure versus the control decks.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, speaking of decks, let's take a look at yours if you're ready for it. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, first we have to show the picture of you victorious with that awesome playmat there, holding the
Yeah,
Han1 and the
it's incredible.
Tarkintown. It's a cool playmat, isn't it? But like, well, first tell me about that because I'm guessing you did pretty well. I think I looked it up and you got like 13th in the last store showdown at Odyssey last time around.
Yeah,
Was that
yeah, I
right?
did.
Yeah. So you did pretty well already. You've kind of made top 16 in some of these already, but it's got to feel great for the prep to pay off. I guess before we dive into the deck, tell me really quick about like the prep coming into this one. How did it prep, and then how did it feel to finally like get the win in the end?
It's gonna sound crazy. I built this deck 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
I had the idea in my mind for a very long time, and I was like trying to figure out a deck to play. I particularly didn't like Han Yellow into aggro because it feels like you're banking on cunning so much to try to get that
for
win.
sure. Yeah.
And I just didn't like those matchups, me personally. And so I was on boss screen. I went to the Vegas PQ the week prior, and I scrubbed out. And so I was like, let me go back to the drawing board and let's do my Han Red. I was like, I said it. I was like, let me actually put it on paper. Let me craft it. Being a Han Yellow player for so much of set three, I was like, I know the fundamentals of Han.
Right.
And so I was like, let me take that and let me see what Quinlan's doing and kind of have, some of those strategies, but in a Han variant. And so like that was my idea. And then as far as prep, I have a couple best friends of mine. Obviously, I said Larson, the boss screen who top date. I have another buddy named Franklin, and he's one of the best Sabine players in all of SoCal. He actually invented Sabine Yellow as set one came out, Sneak Attack K2 Heroic Sack. I think
Oh,
he's
okay.
amazing top tier player. I play test with him all the time. He gets me the Sabine matchup reps I need in completely. And so he helped me a lot. Larson helped me a lot. And then other
Nice.
than that, it was just play testing.
Just getting the reps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, too, it's like a lot of times in these situations, you find a deck that just fits you, and you
Right.
have that comfort, too. I feel like that's over the years of card gaming, like when I've done the best in tournaments, when I've like won things once in a while, it's when I have a deck that, like you said, not necessarily is one you've played for months and months, but one that you just feel fits you, and you just get it.
Right.
Yeah. And then on the day, it just flows, right? But let's take a look at that list really quick here. Let me just
Awesome.
pop that up. There we go. And so here's the list. Smuggling is my real hand. And there is some smuggle there. Obviously, like the blaster is kind of like, I feel like the premier, not counting DJ Tech, right? But as an aggro player myself, the blaster is my most exciting smuggle card to have in my resources. But
Right.
man, where to start on this? I guess just take me through why red and not double yellow, and not necessarily, well, maybe not that, but why the red cards that you put in here? Why those red cards specifically?
All right. I mean, if we're going through, hot shot, that's just it's a
Yeah,
given.
it's a given. Yeah,
Um,
K2SO probably a given too. Yeah.
yeah. Daring Raid. My idea is a lot of games. I'll Han ability card down. Daring Raid Tarkintown their turn one 2-drop.
Okay.
So now if I'm playing against a Quinlan, if you want to get that ping so you can Tarkintown me back, you have to play a 2-drop, which is behind curve for you, so it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And they're generally not planning that. Um, so that's why that's in there. Arm to the Teeth MVP card. I've been high on that card for a while. A lot of people don't think that card's very good. I think a lot of people fundamentally understand that card wrong in the way that it should be used. I use it to win the game. I use it as a sneak attack. You never saw it coming because no
Yeah.
one runs it. And it finishes out, gives me that +4 damage because it gives the unit +2, and then you give another unit +2,
Hmm.
and you can smuggle it for 4. So it's a 4 for +4 attack from smuggle or 2 from hand. From hand also was clutch. I had an insane game in top 4 against Sabine. The third game, I was at 23 on base, or yeah, I was at 16 or something on base. He had the first action. I drew a arm to the teeth and hot shot blaster, and he went to my base with like a rebel assault and a for a cause or something, and I went to like 1 or 2 life. He ended up claiming I got my Han leader out. That was the only thing I had. I armed to the teeth from hand, hot shot from hand, and smuggled hot shot for 10, which is exactly
Holy
what I needed
crap.
to win.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone around thought I lost.
No
And then
kidding.
when
Yeah.
they saw I was I told the man I got a little overexcited. I was like good game. And he was like, "Are you like conceding?" And I was like, "No, I mean, I was like it's a good game for not for not like for you."
Oh no.
Um
You're that guy now, huh? That's okay. I see.
yeah, yeah, no. I love being respectful to
Yeah.
players. But yeah, Arm to the Teeth was so big. It won me probably 4 matches today, four or
That's
five
really
ma or
interesting.
yesterday, 4 or 5 of my matches. It was huge MVP, just pushed that damage out, and yeah, it was just huge. Pillage obviously, then for Hanhei, and then K2.
Yeah, I was curious how you felt, how it felt to have two pillage main board, because you're gonna draw it a lot. But the more I think about it, and the more kind of I hear you talk about it, it really does feel like hand Tate is just, kind of a. I mean, I played a ton of Sabine Cunning in set one, and I loved
Mhm.
Spark of Rebellion. It just won me so many games, right? So having that access, right, like you do, and then when you get to the later stages of the game, having something like Pillage be able to have such a big impact on the hand, I suppose
Right.
it's kind of the same thing. But in an aggressive setting, does it ever feel kind of clunky? Do you feel like if you're playing in a more aggressive matchup, you just skip it? When do you find yourself using Pillage the most often? Is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, Pillage is very matchup dependent.
Right.
I'll never play it against Sabine. It's an instant resource, and then it'll generally come out. For me, I want my deck to be good into everything. One of my strategies is I don't want to play a deck that has an inherent huge weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I chose not to play Django. That's why I chose not to play even Sabine, because I know Sabine kind of even rotated the Django matchup much more in Sabine's favor versus that was at the beginning of the set. But and then even hard control, because I was like, I don't want to lose to Han Yellow. And so I go, what can I play that has solid footing into no matter who sits across from me? And how can I build that main board strategy? And so that's kind of what I decided to do, because going into like even a mid-range late control deck or a hard control deck, having Pillage's main board is so incredible. It creates so much pressure for him, and then players are just like, what am I gonna do? Even against the Yoda in the finals. So turn one, I sparked him. Turn two, card down Kira. Turn three, Pillage.
Wow. Okay, so that pretty much eliminates a whole hand at that point.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that kind
And I
of.
know, and then because of Kira, I know exactly what he had. So then when he keeps one card, I know what it is.
Yeah, and that card is also more expensive too, so it's
Generally.
it's extra bad. Yeah.
Right.
I noticed you run a couple pillage in the sideboard, not pillage, a couple confiscate in the sideboard too. Do you find
Mhm.
that to be something? I feel like when I look at that, you're looking at Bosk removing some stuff to deny
Mhm.
the healing, maybe taking out a Dark Saber on the Sabine matchup, or do you feel like you even need to? Where does the confiscate come in most often?
Uh, Definitely it was in there for Boss Blue.
Right.
I ended up using it. My friend who plays Boss Green, unfortunately, it's got to come in against him. He's doing the bounty stuff.
He knows what he's playing.
Um,
Yeah.
so other than that, I did put like one in against Sabine. The Gamorrean guards were the first cards in, against
Oh, okay.
Sabine.
Yeah.
Force throws too. So the confiscate was kind of like if I had another spot for it.
Hmm.
Um, Generally, I took the R2s out in that matchup because like R2 doesn't do anything for me.
Right. Right. Okay.
Mm.
Uh, the other one I was kind of curious about was the Shadowed Intentions. That's a card that a lot of people talk about putting in decks, but I feel like not a lot of people pull the trigger and actually put it in a deck or a sideboard. Did you find yourself bringing it in very often? And when you did, how did it work out?
I didn't put it in a single time.
That's what I'm talking about. See, people
Yeah,
say, and they don't end up using it. But no, tell me the
well,
intent here. Yeah.
so when I was playing Han Yellow for so long,
Uh-huh.
I have the privilege, Odyssey is my local game store.
Oh, okay.
So I was happy to take it down, the hometown hero. But I have the luxury of having like some top tier players in not only this game but other card games who play this game to
Mm.
get play testing in with. Um, one individual named Justin. I think he was a top tier Magic player for a period of time, and I know he's reputable in that community. And he plays hard control. That's what he loves to play.
Okay.
And my Han Yellow, even into him, as much favored as Han Yellow is into hard control, Shadowed Intentions was something I was running in Han Yellow, and it made a
Hmm.
huge difference against him. Because the moment I would stick it out on a smuggled Big Falcon, they can no longer answer it until Avenger comes out, and Avenger has to attack. Other than that, obviously they can entrench, but I'm gonna have confiscates in at that point generally.
Yeah.
So just having a unit on board that they can't physically answer for like 4 or 5 turns is just huge. And so obviously I didn't end up using it because I didn't play a hard control deck, but that was my thought process behind it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool. That's a good explanation. All right. Aside from that, I mean, I think you see a lot of the stuff you might expect. A couple fourths throw in there again for a little bit more hand hate.
Hmm.
I like the one crate dragon just to have that option to be like, all right, well, if I need to YOLO a crate to finish out a game, like it's in there,
Hmm.
right? The other thing, I feel like the 6 cost Millennium Falcon is something that has kind of come up again in the last couple months, where some people were kind of, I think when the set came out, a lot of people thought it was too expensive and sort of treated it that way,
Hmm.
but it's kind of come around. How do you feel about the card? It's in your list, obviously, so you must like
Hmm.
it, but do you agree that it's better than people initially kind of expected it to be?
Yeah, that one I've been fooling around with so much this set, in Han Yellow and in my Han Red. Um, I find in my Han Red it's even better than it is in Han Yellow
Okay.
because I push so much damage, like in the ground arena specifically, that when they actually end up answering it, I flip to space, and now they're like panicking because generally now they're at lower life totals,
Hmm.
and they're like, "What am I gonna do?" And then, if they can't answer it, I can even smuggle arm to the teeth Little Falcon. Now I'm presenting, what's that, 7 plus 2? I'm presenting 12 damage to base. So cheeky stuff like that, can squeeze games out, and it forces them to now you have to answer 2 arenas, not one.
Yeah, it almost feels like this deck is sort of like what Sabine Cunning wanted to be,
Hmm.
where it's got that little extra bit of reach that Sabine Cunning never really got to compared to what Sabine ECL could do, which kind of choked the
Mm.
Cunning players out. But this deck kind of gets there. It's really exciting. I'm definitely gonna be building this and trying it at my local because I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I finally feel inspired to at least get a little bit of reps on it before we get
Right,
into
right.
Store Showdown season. But speaking of Showdown season, do you plan on bringing the same deck? Are you going to switch it up? Are you the type of player that says, "All right, I had my success with this one. Now it's time to move on"? What's the plan?
I'm unsure, to be completely honest with you. I don't know where I stand currently. I'm like, it just happened. I won, but now people are gonna either be playing it, and I don't know how the mirror is because I never expected the mirror.
Fair
And
point.
and then I'm also like, but now they're gonna be playing Scanning Officer, against the table match, which you'll be able to watch, Game 5. That'll be up, video footage somewhere, because that was the last game they ended up recording, which was
Okay.
me versus the Kira Green. Game 1. And I guess he was really prepped for Han. He's a fantastic player, by the way. I know him. His name's Chris. Um, Game 1, turn 2, he scanning officered me, and it was tech, hot shot, arm to the teeth. All my resources gone, exhausted,
Disaster.
couldn't play anything for the turn. I scooped that game
It's like
later
the
on.
dream scanning officer right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I was like, you mainboard it? Because I expected it from the sideboard.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, wow, yeah, I was.
I've never seen that main board. I gotta say, yeah, I've only
Yeah,
seen it
yeah,
on
and
the
then
side.
even
Yeah.
even he was surprised that he hit 3 smuggle. And
Yeah.
you talked about, my obviously the name of the deck, smuggling is my real hand. I have
Mhm.
17 smuggle cards in the deck. So that's kind of for me, I'm really going so all in every single game. I pretty much only have one card in my hand almost the entire game.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, and then I'm just using the smuggle as my hand. So that's kind of like the way I operate with the deck.
Yeah, I mean I think this deck puts that to great use, right? Where it's like all of your smuggle cards are either going to let you, recur stuff or, benefit what's already on the board, right? If you
Hmm.
have no hand, but you have an established board, and then your resources support what's on the board, that's kind of the best case scenario, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah. Do you find yourself, last question about the deck here, do you find yourself using Tarkintown more often on the first turns? I mean, that's kind of the classic aggro usage of it, but over the course of the day, did that kind of prove true, or were you a little bit more flexible about where it fit in?
It's really matchup dependent. If I have initiative and I can clear their unit generally without having to use it, I'll save it. I can obviously save it for against an ECL deck, whatever's going to be ECL'd in.
Yeah.
Um, especially against Jango Fett, especially, I can save it for a little while because Daring Raid almost clears all their 2 drops.
Hmm.
So that's something I like to do too. Like on turn 2, if they play that little P38 ping thingy, I'll Daring
Hmm.
Raid it, card down, 3 drop.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of lines where I can save it, but I do love sometimes just putting the pressure in, like turn 2 drop, Daring Raid, Tarkintown, their turn 1. Same thing like a Quinlan would do.
Hmm.
So I guess it's just all matchup dependent.
Yeah, it's funny to see how Tarkintown's come up in the last like set and a half. I think compared to a lot of people trying it in set one and then generally being like, well, it's just a little bit too risky. But the reality was people just
Right.
didn't know how to use it as well back then. So
Hmm.
it's cool to see it come up. Any final notes on the deck itself here that you want to share that we haven't covered that you think is kind of cool? You want to shout out?
Yeah, I know some Han players go back and forth on Kira. I think Kira's an amazing card.
Oh, totally
Especially
agree.
against those mid-range decks, they're keeping generally one giant play for like the 5 resource turn, whether that be like overwhelming barrage, an ECL target or something.
Hmm.
And when you Kira snipe that, that's just like so bad for them. And then really like hand knowledge is so valuable once you learn
Yeah.
how they're running, because people have their obviously individual play styles and their individual versions of like a deck. And so once you kind of get that information, that's a huge advantage, especially even for me when I was in the finals, you get to look at your opponent's deck list. He had no takedowns main board, and I was like, oh, Tekken DJ he's going to be terrified of.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that comes up and it matters, and so I think being aware of that is huge.
Yeah, Kira's awesome. I was messing around with Fennec Shand last set, just double cunning Fennec Shand, and Kira was such a great
Wow.
part of the hand control package. Like it was okay. I know we're seeing a little bit of Fennec pop up now, but it was okay, and Kira was a big part of being okay. And then yesterday, I had a Quinlan game where he managed to Kira deny my Bosk and my Forlom in 2 consecutive games on turns I
Oh
really could
my
have used them.
goodness.
So that's how it goes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of it. Thanks again so much for taking the time to talk, telling us a little bit about yourself, showing us the deck here. Before we let you go, any final shout outs or anything like that here after the experience is all done? Looking ahead to Worlds, I suppose, now in
Yeah,
July. And
yeah.
yeah, any final shout outs here, final statements?
Really shout out to Odyssey Games and the head judge there, Justin, who runs our local game store. He's such a fantastic person.
Mhm.
He brings this kind of professionalism to the game. He's so kind to the community. He gives back and he hosts all these events. I think Odyssey has the best prizing I've ever had for any store yet, and he just really pushes getting people to care about this game. He's even starting something where he has a Quinlan deck on standby for when new players come in. They can come play a meta deck now.
Okay,
Come to
nice.
our weeklies and he'll give you a meta deck. You try it out, see how you like the game. And so I'm just a huge fan of Odyssey games. So shout out to that. Um, I have a group of people we're getting together. We're kind of forming a team of like competitive Star Wars players. Names not announced yet. So shout out to all my future teammates or current teammates. So that's shout out to those boys too.
All right, shout out to the Shadow Collective. Hey, there's a good name. That's a good name for your team. I don't know. You don't
It
have to
is.
use that. You don't have to use that though. But and shout out to you too for take the time to sit down and chat. I really appreciate it. We're in the area. I'll have to pull you in for some other stuff in the future here. But in the meantime, good luck with Store Showdown season. Good luck with the prep
Thank you so
for
much.
the Galactic Championship a little bit later in the year. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. It was really fun being on and getting to chat with you.